Hey, what's up, witches? I'm back with kind of another random slash fun video. Hi, you wanna be in the video? I'm here with Loki to do a random miscellaneous category video because one of the first videos that I ever sat down to make on this eclectic channel that I run over here was all about some elements of Norse mythology in one of my favorite series, The Wheel of Time. I've always wanted to do a part 2 or follow-up to that video of just some more widespread mythological references that you will find throughout the books. And just go a little bit into some further detail on those, and just generally nerd out over the Wheel of Time and mythology, because fantasy books and mythology are two of my favorite subjects. So I guess that's why they kind of fit into the general category of this channel. So come on, let's just sit down and have some fun with fantasy and myth. So in the first video that I made, I more just touched on some specific elements of Norse mythology that you'll see referenced, being someone that works closely with the Norse gods myself. But as someone that just loves to nerd out about mythology in general, there's a lot that you will pick up on as you get into the series. So first off, one of the first things that I noticed when I got into the Norse side of things was that the female half of the one power that the women are able to tap into is called Sidar, which sounds a lot like Seder. And along with that, we also have that these channelers in the Wheel of Time, the women are able to channel and are referred to by the title of Aes Sedai. But back in the Age of Legends, it was used to refer to, I think both men and women would be in the ranks of Aes Sedai. But more importantly, Aes Sedai, if you kind of slow it down and blur it all together, starts to kind of sound like Aishi, or the way that it's spelled also is very similar to side, or I believe it's pronounced she, which refers to the Fae or elves in Irish and Celtic mythology, also known as the Tuatha De Danu. So I just thought that was a fun reference that these channelers, their name is making a reference to magical beings from our lore. And along with that, we can see in the novels, as well as now in the book series, where we have this symbol, which is the one put together in the books, is representing the Aes Sedai, or the male and female halves of the one power uniting to form what we know as the yin-yang symbol. And in the Third Age, or the Time of the Wheel of Time series, it has also been split, as the male and female channelers have, to where now you will only see used the female half, which is called the Flame of Tarvalin, because it kind of looks like a little flame, but it's actually the one half of the whole symbol, whereas you will see the male half referred to as the Dragon's Fang. And so I think that also speaks on a deeper thematic level to the series as a whole, where, you know, back in the Age of Legends, they were able to basically live in a utopia, and because men and women were both able to use the power together in harmony to achieve things that one or the other couldn't do on their own. Whereas now, part of what the fatal counterstroke of the Dark One was not only just in tainting the entire male half of the power, was it also just really left all of humanity at a huge disadvantage, because now they're not able to use this entire component of this dualistic magical system. And so really, I think the novels are largely about healing those rifts not only all of humanity together, but especially reuniting male and female channelers is one of the big things that he does as the dragon. Delving further on the subject of the Aes Sedai, they live in the city where the White Tower is, known as Tar Valon. I keep pronouncing it Tar Valon. I don't know if I got that from the audiobooks. It's been a while since I listened to them, but most people pronounce it Tar Valon. I can't remember how it's pronounced in the audiobooks. I want to say in the show that they're calling it Tar Valon because everyone kind of has these accents, but I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch the show now because I can't remember. I keep wanting to be fancy, but anyway, Tar Valon. If you kind of start blending that word together or take a look at it, it looks a lot like Avalon, which was the mythological realm that King Arthur was taken to heal, and where he will come back from when he returns as part of the whole once and future king thing. And you will see this series is chock full of references to Arthurian Legend, which is also one of my other favorite topics to nerd out over. I think long before I was a pagan or really even went to college and started studying mythology and those types of things in depth, I have always been super into Arthurian Legend. And I think when you really start to delve, time for the stereotypical get a cat hair off of my chapstick scene. This could be a whole video topic in and of itself. There's so many deeper themes buried in the Christianized later Arthurian legends that I think if you start to peel those layers away, you might find a lot of pre-Christian pagan origins to some of the themes in these myths, which I'll expand on further a little bit in this video because, yeah, like I said, these books are chock full of references to Arthurian legend, not just Tar Valon sounding like Avalon, but the leader of the Aes Sedai is called the Amerlin, and in the First Age, or Age of Legends, they were called the Tamerlin, and this, of course, sounds a lot like Merlin, the OG wizard. And then later on in the series, we see the male channelers reintroduced under the title of Ashaman, which sounds like shaman. Stepping away from specifically the magical realm in the novels, you will see, especially in the second book, which will be covered, I think, very, very much in the next season of the show, is the hunt for the Horn of Velare, which was stolen at the end of season 1. So we'll see our characters going on a hunt to try to retrieve this horn, much like kind of a Grail quest, but this horn specifically, spoilers, if blown, will summon the spirits of dead heroes and champions of yore to fight on the side of whoever blows it. So they want to get their hands on it so that they can have all of these mighty heroes and people fighting on the side of good for the last battle against evil. But just the whole concept of spirits coming back and them being these champions and like riding forth as an army or a host, I think echoes a lot of the themes of the Wild Hunt that I touched on in my whole video on that topic. And then later on in the series, we might actually see this in the next season if, as I suspect, they combine books 2 and 3. But at some point soon, we are going to see these characters that we see encountered several times in the novels, and they live in their whole own world, parallel universe that the characters travel to using a gateway or a portal. And these characters are called the Aelfin and the Eelfin, or snakes and foxes. So there's one group that have like more vulpine or fox-like features. At 10 points to Ravenclaw for me for off the top of my head remembering the word for the classifications of foxes. And then the other group are more reptilian looking. And these characters especially, I think, have a lot of traits in common with what you will see listed as traits for the Fae or fairies in our lore, because they are said to make bargains with people that come into their realm. They will grant wishes or boons, but you have to be very specific in your wording and your dealings with them, much like with the Fae, because it's very like gift of the Magi, be careful what you wish for, and if you're not very specific, they will try to find a way to kind of trip you up with your own wordings. And yeah, there's always going to be a price if you're dealing with them, as we will see. Like, characters will get something that they've asked for, but they have to give up something and usually make a sacrifice in exchange. And also, when you're dealing with them, as the characters will see, there are things that you can do to try to go in prepared and armed against them, which are also traits that you will see shared with the Fae, which is the use of iron, cold iron specifically. I'm not sure where this association comes from. I'm definitely planning to do more in-depth videos on the Fae, elves, Tuatha, it being a topic that I'm definitely interested in. And then also them being susceptible to music. It has this hypnotic effect on them, which is something I've also seen in more modern day versions of elves and fae in some fantasy literature. I'm not sure if that comes from an old tradition or not. And then also, yeah, as I said, them granting wishes, but being very dangerous to bargain with, much like the fae. I touched on this a little bit in my video on Norse mythology and the Wheel of Time, but I wanted to delve further into it here. I didn't want to go too far into spoilers in that first video, but now with it being both a TV show and a complete series of books that have been out for like 20-something years now, well, I'm just going to assume that if you're watching these videos, you're okay with spoilers. So, spoilers, the character of Matt specifically has several encounters with these fae creatures in the books, and as part of his bargains that he makes with them, he becomes this very Odinic figure because he's able to become this great battle strategian and knows a lot about battle tactics, much like Odin does. He, as part of his deal with them, ends up giving up one of his eyes, much like Odin does, to receive this knowledge and these gifts. And one of the things he receives from these creatures is a mysterious spear that has strange runes marked on it, and I think the blade is made of some strange metal that is not typically seen in the Third Age, so it might be an object power made in the Age of Legends. Like, you'll see several of these types of objects in the books. And then another thing that he ends up falling into with them is that since he doesn't specify what he's going to give them in return for another gift, they end up trying to hang him off of the Tree of Life, which is another non-reference that you'll see in these books, is Avendasora being this symbolic tree of life in these books. And yeah, much like Odin, they end up hanging him from it. So he has kind of a near-death experience. And then later on in the novels, because of Tevarin fate things, he also ends up becoming known as the Raven Prince, Prince of Ravens. Lots of Odin references there with everyone's favorite rogue character, Matt. We also see a Tree of Life being referenced, and in specifically the Eye of the World novels, they left this out, but later at the end of the books we do meet a character that resembles a green man. He's just literally kind of like an ent or a tree guy, but this is never really brought up again, so I understand why they just kind of left that part out and reworked all of it for the show. As I touched on in my review of the series, in the Eye of the World, Robert Jordan was just kind of throwing in a lot of references right off the bat, some of which are carried on into the later books and some not. When I touched on the Horn of Velare summoning dead heroes and champions, another character that I'm really excited to see, I kind of forgot about, that we will be seeing her in the series at some point, is one of my favorite characters, Brigitte Silverbow, and she's a hero from the Age of Legends, which, as you'll see, much like Rand and the Dragon, is a character that is able to be reincarnated throughout time to fight in different battles when she's needed. And you'll see most people, like, reincarnation is a thing in this world. We've seen it kind of touched on even in the show, referring to people being spun out into and reborn to live their lives over and over again as part of the Wheel of Time. So yeah, we're kind of living in this fallen age. It's not quite the Dark Ages, as I said. Now we're kind of moving into the Renaissance, where things are going to start being rediscovered, but a lot of this knowledge, both historical and magical, has been lost to time. So being able to recall things from a past life, whether it be battle tactics or magical ones, it would definitely give someone a huge advantage in this current age that the characters are in. So I will definitely be seeing her, Brigitte, pop up at some point, but she is also a character that I think is making a slight nod to the goddess or legendary figure of Brigitte. Then another thing that I'm hoping we'll start to see touched on more in depth as the show goes on. We saw a little bit of it in the first season, but it becomes a major component both in the novels and, it seems like, as they're setting it up in the show, which is the world of dreams, the dream world. We see the characters kind of slipping into it a little bit. In the books, it's referred to as Tel'aran'rhiod. I don't know why it's called that. I'm assuming it has some translation in the Old Tongue, which was the language spoken in the Age of Legends. But it also Tel'aran'rhiod sounds a lot like Ariandrod, which is a kind of goddess figure or fae figure, mythological figure from Celtic legends. Ariandrod is a figure from the other world, which the dream world in the novels is kind of almost like a parallel world that touches very closely on our own. And if you're able to almost like lucid dream in this world, you can control things, which I think is kind of much like the concept of the other world that you'll see in our version of the myths, where it's a world that closely borders our own, and you can cross over in places where the veil is thin or during certain times of year, and it's populated by this whole other race of beings that live there. But yeah, it's just called Tel'aran'rhiod in these books, which I think is just a little quirky nod to another name from our myths and legends. Some other ones that you'll see, we kind of saw it touched on in We kind of saw it referenced in the show when Moraine hands Rand the little figurine that will help him channel. These are called Ter'angreal, Angreal, or Sa'angreal in the books, which is a reference to an old word for Grail, as in the Holy Grail. So just another nod to Arthurian Legend, which, if we want to go into that topic, there is a lot to mention, as I said earlier. If we go back to our main man, Rand al'Thor, he has a lot of thematic references to the Fisher King archetype from Arthurian Legend. There's a story where a knight is going on a quest and he ends up coming across this castle. Sometimes it's almost like an Avalon type thing where it's like a disappearing, reappearing castle where if you go there once, it's almost like this otherworld type thing where it can be hard to find, and if you go there once, you might never either find your way back or find your way to it again. It's just this very mysterious, transitory thing. Rand, this knight, ends up finding his way to this castle, and this land and this castle is ruled by a person called the Fisher King, who, much like Rand does throughout much of the series, and is like mortally wounded in some way, where he's not dead, but it's greatly diminishing his power. And much like this figure of Rand as the dragon is, especially as the series goes on, we see it's almost like him and his mental state and his well-being is tied to the environment around him and even the land itself, where he's able to affect things, and if he's whole and healthy and in his right mind, apples are growing on trees, and everything's light, and the sun is out, and everything's green and nourished, and the vitality is running strong, because the vitality of the king is tied to the health and vitality of the land itself. Unfortunately, this king being wounded in some way, it's causing the kingdom to fail as well. And you see Rand as kind of this tragic figure where he is suffering these crippling wounds that he's forced to bear throughout the series, and it's greatly affecting his physical and his mental state, and affecting the world around him through just his abilities and his ties to everything and to the web of the pattern as a figure like the dragon. Another reference that you'll see is there's a character in history that you'll see made reference to called Arthur Hawkwing, whose name is Arthur Pendrag, which is a reference to Arthur Pendragon. There's another character soon to be introduced named Elaine, figure from Arthurian legend, the Lady Elaine, wife of Lancelot and mother of Sir Galahad, who ends up being the figure who is able to discover the Holy Grail in Arthurian myth. Here we see she is a figure more directly tied to Rand as the Arthurian figure himself. And then we also see I didn't realize this at first, just because it's kind of an odd name to read on paper, but Egwene. Like when you first read it, I was like, Egwene? How do you pronounce that? But it's apparently, as I found out when I listened to the audiobooks for the first time, Egwene, which can kind of sound like Gwen or Guinevere. Guinevere. As well as, if you really want to stretch it, Nynaeve might, just with the way it's spelled and pronounced, might be a reference to Nimue. I'm not quite as certain on that one. And then the last one that I had made note of, as far as a tie to Arthurian legend, is you will see there is a magical sword that Rand needs, and it's part of a prophecy, kind of much like the sword in the stone. And as opposed to Excalibur, it's called Kalendor. So just another little neat reference there, specifically to Arthurian legend and just some of the broader themes of it, and especially with Rand being this once and future king, dragon reborn figure. You will see a lot of those types of references made throughout the books and I think the show. So I just really wanted to sit down and film this fun little deep dive for you and talk about some of just the little nods and references to mythology that I noticed in the book series. I was lucky enough to, for one of the first times in my adult life, have a snow day because of the crazy amount of snow we're seeing in Kornheim here. So I just thought it would be really fun to sit down and film a more random video that doesn't take quite as much research or planning, and where I can just kind of sit down and nerd out with you to my heart's content. So I hope you enjoyed this quick little fun miscellaneous video about one of my favorite series. I am thinking about doing a follow-up to the video I did on the show, where I kind of, toward the end of that video, did some Season 2 predictions, but now I'm seeing there's a lot of other real-time content creators doing dedicated videos to their Season 2 predictions, so I'm tempted to do that myself. Let me know if that's something you're at all interested in seeing, is just me expounding some more upon what I think they're going to do for Season 2 of the show. But I hope you enjoyed my little random video here about the Wheel of Time and mythology. So until next time, stay classy, pagans.